First Contact's fatal mistake. The Meridian Alliance's first mistake was sending Ambassador Xylac to Earth. As the most decorated diplomat from the gentle gardens of Helios Prime, they thought she would be perfect for contacting the newly discovered spacefaring species. They were wrong. Xylac's crystalline exoskeleton trembled as she stepped out of the shuttle onto what her species considered a nightmare world. The gravity pulled at her joints with savage intensity, 1.3 times stronger than any civilized planet should be. The atmospheric pressure felt like it would crush her respiratory chambers. And the temperature, by the first light, the temperature swung wildly between extremes that would kill most sentient species. "Welcome to Edmonton, Ambassador," the human representative smiled, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's diplomatic liaison." The human stood there, completely at ease in conditions that should have been lethal, wearing only a light covering of artificial skin they called a jacket. Xylac's translator struggled with the concept of Edmonton. The closest approximation in Universal Standard was settlement in Death Zone. Yet these humans had built a thriving metropolis here, where winter temperatures regularly plunged below freezing and summer brought scorching heat waves. "Your hospitality honors us," Xylac managed, her crystalline fingers carefully avoiding contact with the human's surprisingly dense flesh. "Though I admit, I find your world challenging." Dr. Chen's smile never wavered. "We can continue our discussions inside if you'd be more comfortable. Though I should warn you, we're expecting a Category 3 tornado to pass about 80 kilometers south of us later today. The building might shake a bit." Xylac's secondary heart nearly stopped. "A tornado, and you remain here?" "Oh, this building's rated for Category 5 storms. We build everything to handle the worst Earth can throw at us. It's just common sense, really." The human spoke of surviving natural disasters that would level most civilized worlds with the casual air of someone discussing the weather, which, Xylac realized with growing horror, was exactly what they were doing. Back on her ship that evening, Xylac composed her report to the Alliance Council with trembling appendages. "Most esteemed council members, I must strongly advise against any military action against Earth. These humans, they are not like us. They don't simply survive on their death world. They thrive on it. They build their homes to withstand forces that would shatter our strongest structures. Their children play in weather conditions that would kill our strongest warriors. And most terrifying of all, they consider this normal. During my brief stay, I witnessed them continuing their daily activities during what they termed a mild thunderstorm, a storm that would have grounded all ships on Helios Prime. They spoke of earthquake preparedness as casually as we discuss atmospheric filters. Their bodies are dense with muscle, their bones reinforced by evolution to withstand their world's crushing gravity. They are, in every sense, children of a world that should not support life. To attempt conquest of such a species would be suicide. They do not need advanced technology or superior numbers. Their very world is a weapon they have mastered over millennia of evolution. We are not prepared for this. We will never be prepared for this." The Council, in their infinite wisdom, ignored her warning. They saw only the humans' relatively primitive space technology, their scattered planetary defenses, their internal political divisions. They did not see what Xylac saw. A species that treated survival on a death world as their baseline for existence. 3 months later, when the Alliance launched their first strike against Earth, Xylac watched the tactical feeds with grim resignation. The invasion fleet was impressive, 50,000 ships strong, carrying the most advanced weapons in known space. They expected a swift victory. They didn't expect the humans to draw them into the path of a hurricane. They didn't expect the defenders to use the planet's magnetic poles to disrupt their targeting systems. They didn't expect resistance fighters to emerge from underground bunkers that doubled as shelter from their world's natural disasters. The Alliance's mighty armada learned too late what Xylac had tried to tell them. You cannot simply fight humans. You must fight their world as well. and their world had spent billions of years trying to kill them, only to forge them into something terrifying instead. As the reports of devastating losses poured in, Xylac added a final note to her original report. They call Earth a pale blue dot. But do not be deceived. It is not a gentle world, and its children are not a gentle people. They are the survivors of a world that should have killed them. And now, they will teach us why. The Siege of New Brisbane. General Kextar of the Meridian Alliance stared at the holographic display of New Brisbane with mounting frustration. What should have been a simple orbital bombardment had turned into a 3-week siege, and his superiors were demanding answers. "Explain to me," he growled at his tactical officer, "how a supposedly primitive human city is still standing after 3 weeks of concentrated plasma fire." Commander Vixel nervously adjusted her sensor arrays. "Sir, the human settlement. It's not built like anything we've encountered before. The structures appear to be designed to withstand forces far greater than our bombardment." "That's impossible. Our weapons can crack planetary crusts." "Yes, sir, but..." Vixel brought up a detailed scan of the city's architecture. "Look at these reinforcement patterns. The humans didn't just build a city. They built a fortress designed to survive their planet's wrath. The same engineering that protects them from Category 5 cyclones and Magnitude 8 earthquakes is proving remarkably effective against our weapons." New Brisbane sprawled below them, a testament to human engineering. The city's distinctive dome structures were crafted from advanced composite materials that flexed rather than shattered. Underground networks of shock absorbers and stabilizers, originally designed to handle Australia's geological instabilities, dispersed the force of orbital strikes. Even the city's power grid was hardened against electromagnetic pulses, a precaution developed to handle the lightning storms that regularly swept in from the Coral Sea. "Then we'll land ground forces," Kextar decided. "No fortress is impregnable from within." 6 hours later, he watched in disbelief as the first wave of dropships encountered what the humans casually referred to as a dust storm. The swirling wall of red particles shredded through engines designed for the sterile vacuum of space. Those ships that managed to land found themselves trapped by the very environment they sought to conquer. "Sir," Vixel's voice carried an edge of panic, "the humans are using their weather control systems." "Their what?" "The systems they developed to protect their cities from storms. They're using them offensively. They're creating corridors of extreme wind pressure, channeling the dust storm directly into our landing zones." Kextar watched as millions of credits worth of military hardware was sandblasted into uselessness. The humans hadn't just adapted to their world's dangers. They'd learned to weaponize them. Inside New Brisbane's command center, Mayor Helena Wong received the latest damage report with grim satisfaction. The city's automated maintenance systems, designed to repair damage from regular natural disasters, were already patching the minor damage from the orbital bombardment. "Status of the dust storm?" she asked her chief meteorologist. Dr. James Cooper grinned as he adjusted the weather control arrays. "Category 4 and building, Mayor. The same systems we use to divert cyclones are working beautifully to concentrate the storm. Those aliens won't be able to land anything larger than a coffee cup for at least the next week. And our supplies? We're good for 6 months, minimum. The same storage systems we use for flood and fire season are fully stocked. Plus, the geothermal tap is still running at full capacity. They haven't figured out how to disrupt power sources buried 15 kilometers under the crust." Helena nodded, remembering the bureaucratic battles she'd fought to fund the city's extensive survival systems. The same politicians who'd questioned the expense of building to withstand natural disasters were now safely housed in the city's deep shelters, protected by engineering that had been tested against Earth's fury long before the aliens arrived. Above the city, General Kextar received word that 3 more dropships had been lost to the storm. His subordinates were beginning to whisper about retreat, but he couldn't accept defeat at the hands of mere weather. "Launch the walker units," he commanded. "Their mass will let them push through the storm." The massive war machines deploy from their carrier ships, each one representing the peak of Alliance military technology. They fired their retro thrusters, fighting against the howling wind as they descended toward the city. That's when the ground betrayed them. "Sir," Vixol's voice cracked with disbelief. "The humans, they've activated some kind of vibration system in the ground. The resonance patterns, they're identical to what their sensors detect before an earthquake." The walkers, designed for stable planetary assault, found themselves sinking into soil that suddenly behaved like liquid. The same engineering principles that helped human buildings survive earthquakes were now being used to create localized liquefaction zones under the invaders' feet. In the command center, Dr. Cooper allowed himself a small smile. "Looks like those geological stabilizers work just as well in reverse." Who knew? Mayor Wong watched as the mighty Alliance war machines toppled like toys in quicksand. "We spent generations learning to survive this world," she murmured. Did they really think we wouldn't learn to use its power as well? As the sun set over New Brisbane, the dust storm continued to rage, and deep beneath the city, the geological stabilizers hummed their earthquake song. General Kekstar stared at the fortress city that refused to fall, finally beginning to understand what his superiors had not. Every human settlement was a testament to their species' determination to survive on a world that seemed designed to kill them. They hadn't just built cities. They'd built monuments to their own stubborn refusal to be destroyed by forces far greater than any alien army. And now, those same forces were being turned against their would-be conquerors with devastating effect. Storm Riders. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the HMS Thunderchild, watching the massive hurricane build strength over the Atlantic. Category 5 winds howled around the specialized vessel, but she smiled. What the Meridian Alliance saw as a catastrophic weather event, she saw as perfect cover. "Status of Hurricane Xavier," she asked her meteorological officer. Lieutenant Chen checked his instruments. "Sustained winds at 185 miles per hour. Eye wall fully formed. The Alliance ships are pulling back to avoid the storm, just as predicted. They still haven't figured out that we designed our ships to handle worse." The Thunderchild was humanity's response to Earth's deadliest storms. Originally built as a weather research vessel, it had been quickly retrofitted for war. Its hull was designed to withstand the crushing pressures of Category 5 hurricanes. Its navigation systems were calibrated to function in conditions that would ground most spacecraft. "Signal the fleet," Maria ordered. "Operation Tempest is go." Across the Atlantic, dozens of similar vessels moved into position. Each one had been built to study and survive Earth's most extreme weather phenomena. Now they would use that same weather as a weapon. In high orbit, Admiral Renthar of the Meridian Alliance watched with growing concern as his fleet scattered to avoid the massive storm system. "These primitive humans," he muttered. "They're insane to remain in such conditions." His tactical officer cleared her throat. "Sir, we're detecting movement within the storm. But that's impossible. Nothing could navigate in those winds. Nothing from a civilized world," Renthar corrected grimly. "But we're not dealing with a civilized world." The first indication that something was wrong came when 3 Alliance cruisers suddenly lost power. They had been hovering at what they thought was a safe distance from the hurricane when electromagnetic pulses, perfectly timed to the storm's lightning strikes, overloaded their shields. Multiple human vessels detected. The tactical officer shouted, They're riding the storm currents." Maria watched with satisfaction as her fleet executed their attack plan. The Thunderchild and her sister ships weren't fighting against the hurricane. They were letting it carry them, using the storm's own energy to achieve speeds their engines never could. Launching storm drones, her weapons officer reported. Hundreds of small, unmanned craft deployed from the human ships. Like their parent vessels, they were designed to operate in extreme weather. They scattered into the hurricane's winds, becoming nearly impossible to track among the storm's natural chaos. The Alliance ships, their sensors already struggling with the hurricane's interference, never saw the attack coming. The drones emerged from the storm's fury like lightning bolts, striking with electromagnetic weapons that transformed the natural storm into an artificial electronic nightmare. "Sir," an Alliance officer's voice cracked with panic. "The humans, they're using the storm's electrical potential to amplify their weapons. Our shields can't distinguish between natural lightning and their attacks." Renthar watched in horror as ship after ship lost power, caught between the hammer of the storm and the anvil of human ingenuity. They had expected to face primitive spacecraft. Instead, they were fighting people who had spent generations learning to harness their world's most destructive forces. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Maria coordinated the assault with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony of chaos. Her crew had trained for this, running drills in conditions that would have been considered unsurvivable on most worlds. "Hurricane force increasing," Lieutenant Chen reported. "We're approaching wind speeds of 200 miles per hour." "Perfect," Maria smiled. "That means we can go faster." The Alliance ships that managed to maintain power were retreating in disarray, their formations shattered by the combination of natural fury and human cunning. They had never conceived of using a storm as a weapon. But then, they had never needed to learn how to survive one. Deep in the hurricane's eye, Maria sent a message to all human ships. "Remember what they forgot. We were born in the storm. We learned to swim in the rain, to dance in the wind, to harness the lightning. Earth taught us that survival means more than just enduring the storm. It means becoming one with it." The Thunderchild rode the hurricane's winds higher, pursuing the retreating alien fleet. Behind her, the storm raged on, a force of nature transformed into humanity's ally. The Alliance would learn what Earth had taught humanity long ago. True power doesn't come from fighting the storm. It comes from learning to become the storm. In his flagship, now retreating to a safer orbit, Admiral Renthar received a priority message from Alliance High Command. He read it with a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. Multiple hurricane-class storms forming in all Earth oceans. Human fleet activity detected in every system. Estimate hundreds of vessels using weather patterns for combat operations. Request immediate tactical analysis of human weather control capabilities. Renthar closed the message and stared at the swirling storm below. They had come expecting to find primitive savages. Instead, they had found something far more terrifying. A species that had turned their world's deadliest forces into their greatest weapons. The Underground War. Colonel Wei Chen of the Earth Defense Force stood in a cavern 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching alien dropships descend on his tactical display. The Meridian Alliance had finally learned to cope with Earth's surface storms, only to fall into a deeper trap. "They're landing in Grid 7, his geological warfare officer reported. "Right where we wanted them." We nodded, his fingers trailing over the rough cave wall. These tunnels weren't built by humans. They were natural formations, carved by millions of years of tectonic activity. Humanity had simply learned to use them. "Status of the fault line?" he asked. "Pressure building exactly as predicted, sir. Plate movement is within operational parameters." The Alliance forces had adapted their tactics after the hurricane debacle. They now deployed in areas of relative geological stability, avoiding the obvious fault lines and volcanic regions. What they didn't understand was that on Earth, geological stability was always relative. "Begin Operation Earthshaker," Wei ordered. Deep beneath the invaders' feet, carefully positioned charges detonated in sequence. Not enough to cause serious damage on their own, just enough to trigger what nature was already preparing to do. In his command ship, Alliance Ground Commander Texable felt the first tremors. "Status report. Minor seismic activity, Commander. Nothing our new stabilizers can't handle." His science officer sounded confident. They had studied Earth's geological patterns for months, developing countermeasures for what they saw as a primitive planet's random convulsions. Wei watched the Alliance's response on his screens and smiled. "They still don't understand," he murmured. "Earth isn't random. She has rhythms, patterns, if you know how to listen." For generations, humans had studied these patterns. They had learned to predict earthquakes, to understand the dance of tectonic plates, to feel the pulse of their living planet. What had started as a survival necessity had become a weapon. "Sir," his geological officer called out, "fault line pressure approaching critical. Magma chamber showing increased activity." The Alliance forces had positioned themselves in what they thought was a stable valley. They didn't realize they were standing on a geological pressure point, one of many that humans had mapped over centuries of studying their restless world. Wei keyed his comm. "All units, initiate sonic resonance." Throughout the cave network, specialized devices activated, sending carefully calibrated vibrations through the Earth's crust. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were tools developed to help predict and manage geological events. Now they served a different purpose. On the surface, Texvol's forces began to notice something wrong. The minor tremors were building, but not in the random pattern their studies had led them to expect. These vibrations had rhythm, purpose. "Commander," the science officer's voice cracked. "The seismic patterns, they're not natural." "Explain," Texvol demanded. "The humans, they're not just predicting the geological activity. They're conducting it like a symphony, deep underground." Wei watched as centuries of geological knowledge paid off. The Alliance forces had studied Earth's seismic patterns, yes, but they had studied them like outsiders watching a strange dance. Humans had learned to be part of that dance. The first major quake hit with precision timing. As the Alliance's stabilizers adjusted to compensate, secondary tremors struck from unexpected angles. The very ground beneath their feet began to behave in ways their studies hadn't prepared them for. Multiple subsurface anomalies detected. The Alliance sensors were going chaotic. "Magma channels are shifting. This is impossible." Wei's teams had spent years mapping the magma flows beneath the Rockies. They knew every pressure point, every potential vent. Now they used that knowledge to turn the Earth's molten blood against their enemies. They're triggering volcanic activity, Texvol realized too late. Not random eruptions, targeted ones. The valley floor cracked open as precisely directed lava flows emerged, cutting off escape routes and herding the alien forces into ever more unstable ground. The Alliance's geological studies hadn't prepared them for this level of terrestrial manipulation. In the command cavern, Wei received reports from his scattered teams. Each group was using their intimate knowledge of local geological conditions to devastating effect. In California, they were turning liquefaction into a weapon. In Iceland, geothermal vents became natural artillery. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "message from Alliance Command. They're requesting immediate withdrawal from all subterranean engagement zones." Wei allowed himself a small smile. "Send them our standard response." Across all frequencies in all Earth languages and the Alliance's own communication protocols, a single message repeated: "You cannot conquer what you do not understand. Earth is not your enemy. She is our oldest ally, our harshest teacher, and our strongest weapon. We did not survive her trials by chance. We survived because we learned to speak her language." As the Alliance forces scrambled to retreat from the geological onslaught, Wei placed his hand against the cavern wall once more, feeling the familiar rumble of his planet's power. Humanity hadn't just adapted to Earth's geological instability. They had embraced it, learned from it, and now wielded it with the precision of artists who had studied their craft for generations. Nature's children. Admiral Kelthas of the Meridian Alliance stood before the High Council, his crystalline form dulled with exhaustion. The holographic displays behind him showed the devastating losses their forces had suffered on Earth. "We did everything wrong," he began. "We saw their limited space presence and assumed weakness. We saw their harsh world and thought them primitive. We never understood the fundamental truth. Earth didn't handicap humanity. It forged them." The council chamber fell silent as images of Earth's defense played across the screens. Humans riding hurricanes into battle. Cities that shrugged off orbital bombardment. Underground armies that wielded geology itself as a weapon. "Look at this," Kelthas continued, bringing up footage from their final battle. We thought we had them trapped between a megastorm system and an active volcanic range. Instead, we drove them exactly where they wanted to be. The footage showed human forces moving with impossible precision through conditions that should have killed them. They didn't fight against Earth's fury. They flowed with it, using every environmental hazard as a force multiplier. Their bodies alone tell the story, he said. Dense muscle mass to handle high gravity. Reinforced skeletal structure. The ability to survive temperature swings that would shatter our forms. They're not despite their world. They're because of it. In the final footage, a human commander stood atop a ridge as lightning crashed around her. She wasn't wearing any environmental protection beyond simple insulated clothing. Behind her, a volcano erupted, and her troops used the ash cloud as cover for their advance. We thought we were fighting savages. Kelthez's voice grew quiet. Instead, we fought children of a world that makes our most hostile environments look tame. They don't just survive there. They've learned to thrive, to take every challenge their planet presents, and turn it into an advantage. One council member leaned forward. Surely their technology level is exactly what it needs to be, Kelthez cut in. They didn't develop like us, racing to escape their world's surface. They developed to work with it. Their ships aren't designed to avoid storms. They're designed to use them. Their cities aren't built to shut out nature. They're built to channel it. Even their weapons, he shuddered. They learned to weaponize geology itself. The footage shifted to scenes from various battles. Humans using underground magma flows to power their bases. Weather control systems that could turn a gentle rain into a targeted electromagnetic assault. Cities that didn't just withstand earthquakes, but actively channeled seismic energy. Their highest technology isn't in their spaceships or their weapons, Kelthez explained. It's in their understanding of their world. They spent thousands of years learning to survive Earth's challenges. In doing so, they gained something we never could: perfect harmony with the Deathworld. A new image appeared, a simple human child, playing in what the Alliance would consider lethal rain, laughing as lightning split the sky. This is what we fail to understand, Kelthez said softly. Earth didn't make humanity weak. It made them virtually indestructible. They can survive in almost any environment because their baseline for normal would kill most species. They don't fear nature's fury. They've learned to dance with it. The council chamber erupted in discussion, but Kelthez raised his hand for silence. I have one final recommendation. Sue for peace, not because we can't win, though we can't, but because humanity has something to teach us. They've achieved what our civilization never even thought to attempt. True harmony with a world that should be impossible to live on. As if to punctuate his point, the final hologram showed Earth from orbit. Storms swirled across its surface. Tectonic plates shifted beneath its seas, and through it all, humanity didn't just survive. They thrived. We came to conquer what we saw as a primitive species on a death world, Kelthez concluded. Instead, we found something far more valuable. A lesson in what it means to be truly advanced. Humanity doesn't fight their world. They aren't sealed away from it in artificial environments. They are part of it, and that makes them more dangerous than any weapon we could devise. The council voted unanimously for peace that day. Not out of fear, though there was plenty of that, but out of a dawning recognition. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't surviving their deadly world. It was learning to make that deadliness their greatest strength. Years later, when the first Alliance scientists came to study on Earth, they finally understood what their invasion force had learned the hard way. You cannot conquer a species that has made peace with a world of death. You can only learn from them and hope they're willing to teach you their dance.